So I'm not big on going backwards. I like to do new things and move forward and keep going, but I need to go backwards on the cart. Couple of issues. One, it's geared down so low that it makes it awkward to drive. You really need to shift from first to second and second to third before you go 15 feet, or the engine's kind of screaming. So I've got a smaller sprocket to put on the rear end, which will gear it higher, which will make it go faster, but that's not the goal. The goal is just to make it a little more drivable, and especially if the little ones, if we have them keep it in first gear, I want to make it so they're not over revving the engine. Two, there's some grease fittings on the pillar blocks on the rear axle that are inaccessible, and I've never put grease in them. So there's one of the bearings that never has had grease in it, so I really need to get to that and change the fitting out to make it greasable, and I can't without removing the engine. So that's the rear end. On the front end, it doesn't turn sharp enough. You can't even turn around in the street, and that's just my bad. I guessed at it when I was building the frame, and I guessed wrong. So I'm gonna do some changes to that to make it steer sharper, and I'm gonna try to gear down the steering. It's less than a half a turn lock to lock, which I tried to address that earlier, but it wasn't enough. So I bought this little rack and pinion thing to put on the front end. It's going to be kind of a major change, but hopefully it will make it steer better. It'll give me it'll make the steering gear down more so it's not so finicky cruising at high speeds. So that'll be the second step. The first step, we're going to take the back end apart and address this rear end and the gear issue. The grease zert that I can't get to is down in there. So when I take this apart, I'm going to have to change that fitting so that hopefully I get to it in the future. And to get the rear end off, it looks like everything has to come off. The engine, the parking brake, the battery. So this will take me a little while to get all this stuff off of here. So I've kind of been dreading this for a long time, but it really wasn't that bad. There was a screw that held the hot wire onto the starter motor that gave me the blues. I bet I spent 15 minutes working on it. It was a Phillips head screw, and it just did not want to come out. I finally got it out, and then when I put it back together, did I replace it with a new one? Of course not. Put the same damn screw back in there. Okay, so I'm going to take this one off, put this one on. In the meantime, I have another problem. These things want to come loose. These bolts keep wanting to come loose. They're almost impossible to get to in the car. So I think I'm going to put a tack weld on the two insides, because there's no reason that should ever have to come loose. And I think I'm going to tack weld the brake caliper, the old sprocket, which is now the brake caliper. And the only one I might leave loose is this one, so I can make sure that it's running true. And then while I have these off, I need to find a grease zert with a bent one, so I can get to it with my grease gun. This has never been greased from day one, although it may have enough grease from the factory to last forever. I don't know, but I'm gonna put some grease in it before I put it back together. Okay, so I'm really glad I took this thing apart, because the chunk was coming apart. The bolts had backed out. So that makes the gears not line up, so that's a problem. So I'm going to tighten it up, and I think I'm going to weld these nuts to this case, because there's no reason to, there's no adjustment there. There's no reason it can't be welded. And two, if I did need to get into it, I could always cut them off. So I'm going to tighten it up. I'm going to try to get all the freaking grease off of it. And we'll put a little tack weld between the nut and the case. I don't think that'll hurt anything. I think that can only help. I put the chunk together with some fine thread, 1/4 by 28, I believe they are. It's a high strength threaded rod. And I didn't buy a plated rod, it's just black. So I put a lot of grease on it to keep it from rusting. And now that grease has come back to haunt me. I got to get it all off so I can get some kind of weld to stick. But it's pretty tough stuff. I can crank down on them really, really hard. I'm not too worried about them breaking. So of course the holes don't line up. The holes drilled in the new sprocket are too close to the center, but only a half a hole, which makes it even harder. So I've got them marked as well as possible. I'm going to take my little pencil grinder and try to waller that out a little bit. And also, I was worried about the grease fitting and trying to get grease into the bearings. I was being kind of stupid. The bearings are sealed. This just greases this annular space so the bearings can pivot without rusting up. So the bearing was going to be fine without grease. I'm going to go ahead and find a zert for it and put some grease in it, and then that should be it for life, because this is fixed, nothing moves. So it's all good. I'm going to try to open these holes up a little bit, see if I can't get the sprocket on there. So in order to get the new sprocket to go down that way where it's supposed to, I'm going to have to cut the hole bigger to go over the hub, and there's just not much there. So I'm going to cut this, and there's not going to be much sprocket left. I'm not sure what else to do, but I don't know any way around that. I'm going to have to cut it. It's either going to work or it's not going to work, or it'll work with modifications. Wow. So actually this thing fits pretty good. And it's so close to the gear, I can probably use the gear to line it up and get it circular, concentric with the shaft. Dang, this is better than I thought it was going to be. The problem I'm going to have is this disc has to center with the disc brake because it's welded to the cart. So that puts this one wherever, but it needs to line up with the motor. I don't know that it's going to be practical to move this in and out to line up with the motor, so I might have to elongate the holes. So I might end up elongating these holes to shift the motor left or right to make the sprocket, make that sprocket line up with this little sprocket here. Not sure. Onward. We're gonna make it work. So the holes in the sprocket are a little oversized, so that's a little loose. So hopefully I can get it concentric with this gear. But these holes are really tight. So what I'm going to do is, when I get it right, I'm going to weld the sprocket to this thick washer, and that hopefully will keep it from moving around much once I get it lined up and straight. I'm going to set the rear end back in the cart and bolt it down tight, and the brake disc is pretty good. This one's a little wobbly, but after I get it bolted down tight, I can put like a feeler gauge or something on there to try to get it accurate, and I have room to work, and then we'll drop the motor back in. Right now, this new sprocket is straighter than the old sprocket ever was. I just put a straight edge and turn it and look at it. So, but I'm hesitant to weld it, so I double nutted it, and I'm gonna go get it running again and run it up and down the street a couple times. And if everything's copacetic, then I can reach from the bottom and put a little weld on those little spacer washers. And I got a greaser that I can get to. So I think we're good. Put the motor back and see how it lines up this way. I may have to do some adjusting on it. But let's move forward. Having this hoist where I can hang the cart just makes things so much nicer. I guess you could do the same with a forklift or a big floor jack or something, but I have the hoist. I make full use of it. I keep the cart at a comfortable height to work on. Man, if I had to do this kneeling on the ground, I'd have to use somebody else's knee because mine wouldn't put up with it. It's pretty close. Actually, it's very close. I think we're good. I'm gonna bolt it up. It looks really close to aligning with the sprocket, so I'm gonna go ahead and drop the bolts back in the original holes and snug it up. So we got a smaller sprocket. I'll have to shorten the chain, take some links out of it. While I had the parking brake apart, I cut the arm off and I stretched it 1/8 of an inch and welded it back together, and it's going to make it a better grab. I just need a little more throw on the lever arm, but not much. That's all I need right there. Okay, so I think it's all back together. The chain looks a little loose, but it runs pretty quietly. Fixing to set it on the ground, we'll take it for a test run. Yesterday I changed out the drive sprocket. I put a smaller one on, and it is a big improvement over drivability. It's not as jerky, it's smoother. You can put on down the road at the, I don't know, 15, 18 miles an hour, comfortable cruising speed, and the engine's not screaming. The chain's no longer rubbing on the case, which was a problem with the big sprocket. So all good. And then I tried to adjust the parking brake lever. I made it longer, which was a mistake. I should have made it shorter, so I cut it and made it shorter, and then did some adjustments. I over drilled these 2 holes so I could twist it a little bit and line it up a little better. So now the parking brake is working better than it ever has. So kind of done back here.